This is Marcus Corvo, Studio MMA and MMA Nuts. We're here with Mike Dolce. You got Dwayne Bang Ludwig fighting. Instead of going down in weight, which you do a lot of times with fighters, you have him come up in weight. Yes. And we've seen some good results. Talk to us about that.
Absolutely. Dwayne walks around at 195 pounds. So for the last 3 years, he was making lightweight 155, weighing 195. That's a 40-pound weight cut. And you could see in his performance, I mean, he was spending most of the time making weight and not developing skills and strategies for the fight. So what we did last year, we brought him up to welterweight, which now he's undefeated as a welterweight. He's 2-0, just coming off a huge win over Amir Sadallah. And this is going to be number 3 against Josh Neer.
How far do you think Dwayne is from a title fight at 170?
You know, he's probably, you know, he goes out there, he beats Josh Neer, he finishes Josh Neer. He's very tough. We have a lot of respect for Josh, but I think it's a great fight for Dwayne. He beats Josh, Dwayne steps up to the next tier of competition. So, you know, I think that certainly puts him within the top 10. He gets 2 or 3 wins in the top 10. He gets 1 or 2 finishes. Out of those 3 fights, he's right in title contention.
Josh Neer, who is probably more versatile or better on the ground, but likes to bang. Are you guys, how much, actually, when it comes to training camp, how big part outside of the diet are you of the actual training camp?
You know, I do a lot of work, you know, with Dwayne specifically. He and I are very close friends. We've known each other a long time.
And for people that don't know, you know, Mike is no beginner to the game. You were fighting yourself, so obviously you can be in there and you can not mess them up, but mess around with them.
Absolutely, yeah. I get in there. I train with all my athletes. Thiago Alves, Rampage, even. You know, I would train with Rampage all the time.
You train with Rampage?
Yeah.
How crazy is that?
It's crazy. It's crazy, you know, because I'm a 200-pound guy. I fight at welterweight. Rampage, obviously, is a 250-pound man. But I get in there and train whatever they need. Whatever my athletes need, I get in there and I do. I make sure to do with them. Specifically wrestling, which I'm pretty decent at. Wrestling and boxing is more my strong point. But I'm always in shape, you know, so I definitely get in there. I train with Dwayne a lot. Thiago Alves, I train with him all the time when we do those training camps. So with Dwayne, it was a lot of, because I was, you know, traveling the world and he was in Colorado with Grudge, you know, his team. So I do a lot of consulting on what the overall training schedule should be. Where Dwayne's the type of guy that he pushes real hard, so you know it's kind of my job to pull him out of the gym a little bit and force him to take rest days, down days.
Last week we saw one of the biggest upsets in the UFC with Anthony Johnson coming in 11 pounds overweight, and obviously his contract got cut. It's the 3rd time that he misses weight. He did say though that he was sick and that he was very close to weight, and then he had to drink water only a few hours before the weight. First of all, how believable is that to you? And second of all, why is he missing the weight?
Well, first of all, Anthony is a great guy. I do know him, you know, personally, not very well. I know him well enough personally. He's a great guy. I like him a lot, and I like him as an athlete. I like to watch him fight. That being said, there's no excuse to not make weight. There's no excuse to not make weight. Every athlete within 3 pounds of their weight class is extremely ill. They're extremely sick. They feel terrible. They should be hydrated immediately. Athletes should not be making 20 and 30-pound weight cuts, but that's the nature of the sport. That's what we do. So that it's just a fact that we have to accept. So for Anthony not to make weight, it's absolutely unacceptable. There's 2 parts of the contract. You make weight and you fight. If you don't fulfill one part of the contract, it's unprofessional. Yeah. So I mean, I'm very adamant. You should have seen Vitor. I mean, you saw in Dana's video vlog. You see Vitor. Vitor's just as bad shape as Anthony or any other athlete is. You should see Thiago Alves. When he gets down to 175, man, you know, if a doctor were to walk by, they'd immediately hook IVs into him, take him to the hospital, and make him stay there for 3 days. So this is just the nature of the sport. It's what happens. So for Anthony not to make weight, it's unacceptable.
For you as a weight specialist, I would call it, when it comes to the diet, but not just the diet, because you understand exactly what you said, making weight, and it's fighting in itself can sometimes be unhealthy, but obviously making weight is not the healthiest of things. Now, if you look at the average American, how they live throughout the year, 365 days, it's those 24 hours, 48 hours is nothing, right? But for you, when it comes to your athletes, would you rather them stay a little bit closer to fighting weight between fights as well, or do you not mind them blow up a little bit?
If it were up to me personally, I would have all of my athletes fight at the exact weight they walk around at. I mean, that would be my, absolutely.
You don't think the extra weight is much of an advantage?
It's not an advantage. What it does, cutting weight, it eliminates the disadvantage because the other athlete, the competitor, is cutting weight. I mean, most of the guys at the high level, they're cutting 20 to 30 pounds in the last, you know, 2 or 3 weeks before a fight. It's just what it is. So guys like Anthony Johnson, he's a 220-pound man that was fighting at 170 and then moved up to 185. I mean, most of the guys, you know, in the UFC, it's a 20 to 30-pound weight cut, even at lightweight. Most lightweights are walking around in the 170s, even touching 180. So making weight, you know, cutting 20 or 30 pounds doesn't give an advantage. It eliminates a disadvantage. You know, it's unfortunate. I would love to see all my athletes just fighting, waking up in the morning and fighting at the exact weight that they are 3 weeks before competition. That would ultimately be my goal, but it's the athlete's choice, unfortunately, and that's what they do.
We see some of the champions that don't cut that much weight. George St. Pierre never allows himself to go over a certain amount of weight. Frank Edgar is very, very close to weight all the time. And we just saw Jose Aldo, who performed really well last week, who said that he allowed himself in the past to blow up a little bit, but he's been staying closer to weight. And that's something that you would recommend fighters. If you look at percentage of body weight, what would you say is the ultimate for a fighter to walk around at?
For body fat percentage, I think combat athletes are best prepared between 7 and 10% body fat. That's when their body is at its healthiest, it's at its leanest, but it still has body fat on the body, which is necessary to protect the vital organs, to offer lubrication to the joints, ligaments, things like that. We need fat on our body. So that being said, guys like George St. Pierre, he gets up well above 190 pounds. He touches 200 pounds. I think Frankie Edgar is probably the only guy that truly stays close to his weight. I mean, I know a lot of these guys. I see him off season. Yeah. I'm 204 pounds right now, and George is bigger than me half the year.
Really?
Yeah, he's a big. I mean, and he's at a very low body fat. He carries a lot of muscle. He's a mesomorph. He's like a mesoectomorph, and he carries a lot of muscle on his body. So he does a great job in making weight. And he's a full-time athlete. He does this 12 months out of the year, so he doesn't blow up and put on unnecessary weight like a lot of these guys do. You never see George without abs. You see a lot of other guys get fat. George doesn't do that. I think Frankie Edgar is probably the only guy in the UFC that I can think of that stays within 10 pounds of the weight class.
And when it comes to body weight percentage of that, cutting your body weight percentage off, what would you say is healthy, okay?
Nothing's healthy. I mean, the honest answer, it's not. Cutting weight is not healthy. I'm the first one to say it. I've cut over 40 pounds in a very short period of time myself. So I understand intimately just how unhealthy it is. It's the nature of the game. It's part of the job. It's what we do. It's an unfortunate fact, but it is a fact nonetheless. But what I do prefer, I like my guys to stay bigger longer. So a lot of guys, they start suffering 2-3 weeks before the competition. They shut off their fluids. They shut off their foods. I disagree with that, because now you have an athlete that's extremely unhealthy for 2 or 3 weeks before competition, instead of keeping them as healthy as possible, all the way until the last second, and then boom, we pull out the water, we flush them back up. So it's a very short period of time that their body's under duress.
Right, and also they can train harder for a longer time or less risk for injury as well, right?
That's exactly right.
Now, out of the guys that you work with, and some of them that you mentioned they cut a lot of weight, who is the grumpiest bastard out of all of them?
Grumpy. I think Rampage. He certainly he gets pretty grumpy.
You ever get worried being around him?
No. He's a great guy. I mean, I love the guy, but when it comes to he likes to eat, and he doesn't like to go through. He loves to fight. He just doesn't like the process of making weight. Right. Where guys like Dwayne, I mean, Dwayne cuts, making lightweight, used to cut over 40 pounds, and Dwayne's awesome all the way into the scale. His personality never changes. Guys like Thiago Alves, he cuts a bunch of weight also. I mean, he's great the whole way through. I mean, doesn't look very good. He's not very healthy, but I mean, he keeps a great positive mental attitude, during the process. So I think, Quentin's probably the one guy that, really dislikes the weight cutting process.
Funniest story when it comes to the weight cut?
Funniest story coming to the weight cut? Do we have any funny stories? I mean, the last one I did with Johnny Hendricks, Johnny was, he walks around 210 pounds, and,
wow, really?
Yeah, he's a big guy. He's got a lot of muscle. Yeah. I didn't realize how muscular Johnny is. So I was actually shocked. But the last time, cutting weight, with him, we just hung out in his room, talking politics the whole time. So we cut 8 pounds that morning. Woke up, I think, 179 to make 171. So it was 8 pounds weigh-in day. And he's a smart guy. I have a background in politics. So we sat there cutting weight, talking politics the whole time, which shows you just how, sharp his brain was during the process. So that might not be the funniest story, but it was pretty darn interesting.
I'm impressed. Was he able to keep up in a discussion?
So absolutely. I mean, he was very succinct in his conversations, and it's a good tool for me as a coach, because I like to see what the cognitive function is of my athlete during the process, to see how drained they are. I mean, Johnny was sharp. He was on point the entire time. So it was actually, most of the guys, they sit there and they talk about cartoons and girls and whatnot. So to speak with a gentleman like Johnny, talking about politics was pretty cool.
What's next for you, Mike? Except from Friday night, obviously, with Dwayne. What's after Dwayne?
Yeah, we got Dwayne on Friday night versus Josh Neer. Then I got a couple days in Las Vegas, with my wife and my family. Then I head down to Florida with Thiago Alves. I got 4 weeks in Florida with Thiago for his training camp. Then 2 weeks in Australia where he fights Martin Kampmann, headline in that fight. I think it's the FX card. So always working.
Talking about working, this is work for you, but you know Martin very well as well.
I do. Martin's a great guy, and it kind of, you know, it sucks in a way being, you know, against, you know, Martin, because Ray Seppa, who I work with intimately with the Vitor, now we're going to be across the cage from each other. But it's a job, so I love it. Both of our guys are at the top of the card. They're both getting paid. They're both feeding their family. They're both getting the spotlight. We're going out there, we're having fun. So right after that fight, you better believe we're all going to be, you know, sitting in a restaurant somewhere, having a nice big, you know, earned meal, and enjoying the process. Whoever wins, you know, it doesn't really matter as much. It's just the opportunity to go out there and feed our families is the big thing. And professionals at this level, they understand that. So there's no ill will, there's no animosity. It's really, it's like, you know, you're sitting down with your buddies at a poker game. You know, the poker game happens to be, you know, punches and kicks and things like that.
And I'm not going to ask for a prediction for the fight, but I personally believe that has the potential to be a fight of the year, actually.
That's, you know, that's fight of the year. Tiago and I have talked about that fight since last year. That's one of the fights on our list that we would think would be just an amazing fight. And I think both of their stocks will rise. Their style is very similar. I mean, we could argue who has the edge in striking. We could argue the edge in wrestling, the edge in grappling. I mean, they're both so well matched and even experienced. Yeah. They fought a similar caliber of guys. So, I mean, this is one of the best fights that the UFC could put on, I think, from a fan's perspective. From a coach's perspective, man, I mean, we have to get up as a team and really do our jobs. And, you know, if whoever doesn't bring their A game all the way across the board, that's who's going to lose. Everybody has to be perfect for this fight. And that's the fight you want to see, right?